This is Chongqing, and Chongqing got my attention after I saw this video. And guess what? Chongqing wasn't even considered a tier 1 city until 2021. Now, this really intrigued me because if you look at our tier 1 cities, there's water scarcity, landfills, potholes, and some cities are literally drowning. So, I had a lot of questions. Why do our cities look so bad? Why do we lack basic necessities? And can our cities ever look like this? I mean, there has to be a way, right? So as usual, I decided to make a video to get all my answers. I've spent the last week researching. I looked at some international cities and 3 of our largest cities, that's Bangalore, Mumbai and Delhi. And I learned that the problem goes a lot deeper than what we were actually told. That is lack of civic sense, population. There's actually a lot more to it. So I'll share with you everything I learned. Starting with, is there a recipe for building a perfect city? Why are our major cities failing? Who really holds the power to make better cities? The smaller Indian cities that are transforming urban living. And lastly, what is the government doing to fix all these problems, and if it's even enough? So I actually want to put forth this question to you guys first. What do you guys think makes up an ideal city? Is it the economic activity? Is it good housing, aesthetics, connectivity, or just the space to walk without worrying about falling into a pothole? So if you thought of all of these things, you are somewhat right, but there's a lot more that goes behind building an ideal city. I want to give you an example of a city I visited last year, that's Tokyo. So I got to study a part of its infra and I learned so much. You know, Tokyo is the perfect blend of traditional and modern design. Almost every area has stores, restaurants, places for entertainment, so you don't need to travel long distances for literally anything. What really caught my attention though was these bright neon buildings which you might have seen in a lot of movies. So these buildings are basically known as Zakyo in Japan, and they're very interesting because apart from the way they look, they were actually designed to serve a very important economic purpose. You know, unlike what you see in US or even in India, every single floor in these buildings has its own little micro businesses. These buildings contain everything from restaurants, bars, retail outlets, lawyers' offices, salons, schools, healthcare offices, you literally name it. So they came about post World War II when the Japanese wanted to maximize the usable floor space and wanted every square feet utilized well for economic activity. What they basically did was they started cramming a lot of small stores in these buildings. While in theory it doesn't sound ideal, but when you can stack a bunch of retail businesses vertically, you can actually cram a whole lot of retail activity into a very small part of a city. For example, take a look at this. It's 12 small businesses on one single floor of one tall building. Now, because of this, Tokyo was able to provide a variety of shops to its citizens and allow more small businesses to thrive instead of just the big supermarket chains giving affordable spaces to all. In fact, Japan has a national law which is called the Large Scale Retail Law, which literally states that anyone who wishes to build a store larger than 500 square meters must obtain the consent of neighborhood retailers and grants small and medium retail owners virtual veto power over construction of large new stores in their markets. Not just this, Japan also has very strict zoning laws which has contributed to Tokyo's planning. Now, these laws basically limit the size of stores in residential areas so that more stores are open in commercial areas and both the commercial and residential areas are kept separate and not mixed together. What this basically does is the residential areas and commercial areas stay well planned and noise and traffic does not become a part of cities and keeps the city walkable. In fact, not just Tokyo, cities like Singapore, Vancouver are also considered successful partly due to their zoning laws. Now, this was very interesting for me to learn, but also got me questioning, why did Indian cities implement these zoning regulations? Could it have benefited our cities as well? But as I was digging deeper, I learned about India's version of zoning laws that we learn about later in the video. But more importantly, it made me realize that while it's easy to idealize Tokyo's design and planning, creating a city in itself is so complex. Because there's actually a lot more to it than just zoning regulations. And the problems in each city, every country are very, very subjective, because in every country, every area has a different topography, different land size, different water access, culture, resources, budgets, and laws, which when put together creates unique problems for building a city. For example, let's talk about the city I grew up in, that's Bangalore. So I've lived in Bangalore for over 15 years now, and I've seen it transform from the garden city it was to a massive IT hub, which in my opinion has one of the best ecosystems to offer to anyone who's young, ambitious, and wants to do something big. Now, obviously, because of this opportunity, we also have a large influx of people coming to Bangalore every single year, which Bangalore is actually not equipped to handle. And it's also one of the reasons for Bangalore's ever-growing traffic problem. You know, I literally almost lost a deal last week because I wasn't able to make it to the meeting on time because of the horrible traffic despite leaving 45 minutes early. And there's an actual stat around it that Bangalore loses nearly 20,000 crores because of its traffic every single year. You know, it's a problem that everybody complains about, but there are no straightforward solutions to it. Traffic and mobility expert Professor Sri Hari pointed in a report that Bangalore's road length has not grown enough compared to the rise in vehicles. The road density is actually just 8.2 kilometers, which is almost 1/3 less than Delhi. Another problem with Bangalore is the way it was planned. So you see, parts of Bangalore was designed with a star pattern, while all the well-planned cities in the world like New York, Barcelona, Kyoto follow something called a grid pattern where roads run parallel and across each other. Let me show you. So let's say you want to go from point A to point B in a city which has a grid pattern. To reach point B, you have multiple paths and thus the traffic gets distributed. But if you look at a star pattern, in a star system, you only have one or two main ways to reach from point A to point B, which gathers traffic coming from the substreets on one main road. Now, the star patterns are the result of rapid unplanned growth in cities, which is basically called urban sprawl, and this is also the reason for a lot of issues in the city of Mumbai. I interrupt this segment to share some news with all of you. So around 1.5 years ago, we started a video editing cohort because we had this thesis that we're moving towards a world where it's becoming easier and easier to build products, but harder to get users. So distribution is going to become the mode. And you know, somewhere our thesis was right, because if you look at companies, founders, everybody is creating content right now. And honestly, making compelling videos, understanding the algorithm is now a legitimate long-term career. We at AV also are now in the middle of our 7th cohort, and we have trained over 1,800 plus video editors who are now working with companies like Blinkit, Zerodha, Zoho, and folks like Ali Abdal, Nikhil Kamath, Tanmay Bhatt. You know, 80% of students who applied for placements have got jobs with average salaries of 4.5 lakh per annum. And I don't know if I can legally say this, okay? But honestly, anybody and everybody who joins the cohort is willing to finish the cohort, get their portfolios ready, we have a job for you. And we have worked very, very hard to create this recruiter network of 500 companies who are all hiring multiple video editors from us, by the way. So, you know, while we have so many people complaining about not getting jobs on the internet, I keep telling them, come to our cohorts, we can help. But then they say, oh, it's video editing. But honestly, that's where the demand is right now. And you need to be okay with a job that's not software engineering. And I'm not exaggerating, we have more recruiters than students sitting for placements as of now, and getting packages higher than engineering colleges. You know what? Don't take my word for it. Come experience it firsthand. We're doing a free masterclass where you can learn how to edit videos like AVTV, understand content better, get to know our instructors, know what our community is like, and see some of the work that our cohort students have done before. And more than anything, knowing content, knowing editing will help all of you build leverage for yourself. So come watch it even if you don't want to join the cohort, because you might just end up learning something new. I'm putting the masterclass link in description. See you there. Mumbai has a very unique geography. It's basically on a narrow peninsula. If you look at cities like Mumbai, right, there's no space to expand horizontally, so they have to grow vertically to make space for people. Even if you look at cities like Manhattan, which has very similar geography to that of Mumbai, it has expanded vertically. In fact, Manhattan has literally increased its size by almost 2 additional Manhattans by adding tall buildings. But unfortunately, this is not possible in Indian cities because we have some of the most restrictive land use constraints in the world. So FSI, or Floor Space Index, which is used to regulate the maximum amount of floor space that can be built on a given plot of land is just 1.3 in Mumbai, whereas if you look at cities like Shanghai or New York, FSI there can go up to 25. We did a whole video breaking down the housing issue and fallacy around FSI, which you can check out here if you want to understand the housing problem better. Now, apart from this problem of FSI and housing, another question that pops into everyone's mind when you think about Mumbai is the rains. Why does Mumbai drown every single year? I know that it has become a meme of its own on the internet, but for the people who've been living there, it's a social and economic nightmare. Hundreds of people die, thousands of houses get destroyed, and 14,000 crores lost in a decade alone. And it's not that floods and heavy rainfall are a new phenomenon to Mumbai, It's been a part of the city's story for decades. So the Municipal Corporation of Mumbai, that's the BMC, they had proposed a stormwater drainage system project called the Brimstowad in 1991 to replace the British-era drainage system. It was a project which was supposed to be completed within 12 years, but it only started in 2005, and even until now, it has not been completed. And this problem of flooding was made worse by the condition of this river, which is Mumbai's largest river, known as the Mithi River. Over the years, the river has become a garbage dump. Untreated industrial waste, illegal construction, and building of land for BKC have reduced the river's width and the ground's ability to absorb water, which has led to increased floods. In fact, it was because of the massive waste which was dumped into the river that the 2005 floods became worse. Now, what has the BMC done to fix this? They built retaining walls despite warnings that it would only lead to more flooding, and have spent thousands of crores on just cleaning the river. But look at these and read what the people living near the river have to say, and you'll realize that what they have done is not merely enough. And honestly, every time the media and the public criticize the BMC and the government for this, the blame just gets shifted towards somebody else. Since we're talking about shifting blame, let's now talk about the city which has become a hotbed for blame games, which is making its condition worse. I'm talking about Delhi. If you've been following the news in the past few weeks,
दिल्ली में एक बार फिर तेज बारिश शुरू हो चुकी है.
you might have seen that Delhi is again facing a water crisis.
Delhi water crisis issue.
While political parties and states are blaming each other for the crisis,
कौन सा एरिया है वो जहाँ पे भारतीय जनता पार्टी और भारत के प्रधानमंत्री की देखरेख में वो एरिया होता है?
the city is suffering.
एक गली पे एक टैंकर आ रहा है, पूर्ति होएगी. ऐसे मर रहे हैं गर्मी के मारे तो और मर जाएंगे प्यासे लोग बाहर.
Delhi gets 90% of its drinking water from its neighboring states, that's Himachal Pradesh, Uttarakhand, Haryana and Punjab, and the remaining 10% comes from groundwater. But you know what? Delhi has already extracted 99% of its groundwater. Increasing population and disputes with Haryana are often said to be the reason behind their dependency on groundwater. But one critical reason is also the poor condition of the Yamuna River. You see, Delhi gets 40% of its water from the Yamuna River, but instead of keeping the river clean, it's instead become the single largest source of pollution for the river. Now, talking about pollution, have a look at these. You must have definitely seen these garbage mountains, which have become one of the reasons behind Delhi becoming the most polluted city in the world, apart from rising vehicle emissions, construction burning of crops in neighboring states, and industrial waste. Now, one of the reasons behind the rise and poor waste management in Delhi, in fact, not just Delhi, a lack of planning and design in all the cities in India is because of poor master plans. Now, what's a master plan? The master plan is simply a blueprint for how a city will look, how its land will be used, and how it will function. So it's mostly based on the principles of Cartesian zoning that classify land parcels into residential, industrial, roads, open spaces, etc. Remember the zoning laws we spoke about when we spoke about Tokyo? So in India, land use management are primarily governed by these master plans. So these master plans are typically created for a 20-year vision, and that is actually one of the problems crippling Indian cities. See, if you look at cities, there are these complex adaptive systems and are fundamentally very unpredictable. I mean, think about it, right? How could you predict what will be the population of a city accurately and fix guidelines on housing, transport, and other activities in a city based on those forecasts? So what's basically happening is, firstly, our master plans are not being updated as the cities involve. Secondly, 39% cities don't even have any master plans. And thirdly, the ones which do have them, they have a lot more regulations about private areas instead of public areas like footpaths, street networks, and gardens. This essentially means that most of the attention of urban managers is spent on enforcing what private individuals can or cannot do in their own land rather than what public authorities should do in public spaces. Now, we also try to understand if this is the problem, and if we know that these master plans need to be updated, why is nobody doing it? Who's actually at fault here? So one of the reasons that we found behind this is a lack of power for city municipal corporation. You see, growing up, you all might have heard our parents say, "ये corporation वाले कुछ नहीं करते" whenever you cross those poorly constructed places in your city. Now, while they were right in blaming the corporations, because after all, our constitution has given the power of urban planning to these municipal corporations, the reality is that in most cities, the corporation folks don't even have a say. Most of the work is done by bureaucrats or development authorities appointed by the state or the central government. For example, if you look at Delhi, most of the work is done by Delhi Development Authority or DDA. But during a recent court hearing, the Supreme Court said that there are so many illegal colonies in Delhi because this DDA is clueless about where 60 to 70% of the land even is. If you look at Bangalore and Mumbai, on the other hand, they haven't even had municipal elections for over 5 years, with their corporations being controlled by the state governments. While the annual survey of Indian cities revealed that about 1400 cities didn't have any elected mayor for over 9 years. Now, why does this matter? You see, a mayor is like the head of a city, like the prime minister of a city, and she gets voted by the people and is directly accountable to them for any problems related to the city. Every well-developed city that you can imagine, like New York, Amsterdam, Paris, all of them have a mayor. But since we don't have any elected mayors and the municipal corporations lack power, our cities also don't have any revenue. You know, Indian cities only earn 0.72% of the GDP compared to 7% and 6% of countries like Brazil and South Africa. 70% of this revenue goes towards expenses, and whatever is left is not even enough to meet the capital expenditures of running a city. So yes, the state of affairs as of now is very worrisome, and after examining all these challenges, it also left me wondering that, is there any solution? Has anybody solved any of these problems? Is there any hope for Indian cities? Are there any success stories that we can learn from here? Fortunately, the answer is yes. I stumbled upon 2 great case studies of urban planning and development in India that I wanted to share with you guys. So I learned that there's a city in India that's actually designed taking inspiration from the human body. Interesting, right? The city is Chandigarh. So the idea to design Chandigarh as a human body was by this famous French architect. He basically based the concept of the city on 4 major functions. Residential areas constituted the living part, educational and industrial areas constituted the working part, places for public activities made up the caring part, and the roads made the circulation part. In fact, Chandigarh was called one of the best planned cities in India. In fact, did you know that Chandigarh has categorized its roads into 7 different parts, which are known as the 7 Bs? They were categorized in such a way that the vehicle and pedestrian traffic did not overlap and traffic was managed efficiently. Also, remember the grid layout I mentioned while talking about Bangalore? Well, Chandigarh was also designed with a grid pattern. And apart from traffic management, what the grid also did for Chandigarh was that it divided the city into several sectors, with each sector having its own residences, shops, and markets for basic amenities. It's kind of like each sector is a mini city where people can meet all their basic needs just by walking. While Chandigarh's design is impressive, it was laid out in the 1950s, which is a long time ago. So I also looked at the existing cities. Have any of them transformed themselves? The answer is yes, and it lies in our next example. So a decade ago, when the government launched the Swachh Bharat mission, the city of Indore looked like this. It was ranked 149th on the Clean City Index, but in just 3 years after that, it reached the first position, which it has not lost since, by the way. The chief architect behind this remarkable transformation was Indore's municipal corporation, which, to give you context, has a budget of 8 times less than the BMC in Mumbai. See, making a city clean is not just the responsibility of a municipal corporation, but also its citizens. So Indore's municipal corporation recognized this and solved this problem very strategically. The first thing they did was they distributed and installed dustbins for free in the areas where people were the most resistant. Secondly, they employed their own waste collectors instead of outsourcing the problem. Thirdly, this waste would then be sent to segregation facility, from where the type of waste which can't be recycled is sold to private companies, which also helps them meet a portion of their expenditure, along with selling carbon credits in the international market, which is actually pretty innovative in my opinion. Honestly, as I dug deeper, it's not just Indore. There are examples of several other cities too which have transformed themselves, like Surat, which became one of the first Indian cities to recycle water at scale. Dharampuri, a small town in Madhya Pradesh, became one of of the first cities to achieve water surplus by creating an efficient and integrated network of water supply. Now, though all these examples are problems that are being solved in silos, it still shows us that there are solutions out there. Now, I also looked at some of the government initiatives and how they are contributing to solving the infra problem. The central government also has actually been chipping in to actively improve the city's condition. In fact, if you look at the last few years, their investments in urban projects have increased by 488%. Schemes and initiatives like Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, Amrut, Swachh Bharat, Smart Cities have been launched to solve the housing crisis for the poor, make basic facilities like water and electricity available for everybody, and make our cities livable. But I also realize it's not just the government driving urban development. The private sector also has to play a crucial role, because if you look at Gurgaon, DLF has been instrumental in transforming the city's infrastructure. Hiran Adani Group has played a massive role in developing Powai in Mumbai. Infosys has been a major player in development of Electronic City in Bangalore. So this collaboration between public and private sectors is essential for solving urban problems at scale. As of now though, about 72% of financing for urban projects comes from central and state governments, with commercial financing providing only 5%. So I feel like to accelerate the infrastructure growth, we also need to increase the private sector's participation. By the way, there's a way for all of you also to be part of India's infrastructure growth story. There's an interesting investing opportunity for all of you, that is mutual funds. You see, picking and investing in individual stocks can be cumbersome, but with mutual fund, you get a reliable and smart way to invest in well-diversified themes like infrastructure. Infra mutual funds primarily invest in companies working towards infrastructure development and avenues. So you can choose a variety of infra funds available from various mutual fund companies like ICICI Prudential, HDFC, Aditya Birla, Kotak, and many more. You can check out the full list in schemes available in infrastructure theme here. So, as we have seen how every city in India has its own unique problems and how some have even figured out their own unique solutions, but there's one more thing I want to leave you guys with. You see, we all need to understand that it's not just the government and private companies' jobs to take care of our cities. It's also our responsibility. I've seen countless posts on social medias and during my travels how people ruin public infrastructure once it's built. Now, we all want world-class infrastructure like the West, but sadly, we lack their civic sense. So the onus of maintaining the cities once they are built well also lies on us. We all need to be doing our part in creating the cities we aspire to live in. We need to ignite some self-pride and responsibility and do what we can to make these cities better. Anyway, I had a lot of fun learning about cities, infrastructure, and I hope you learned something new from this video as well. That is it from me today. My name is Achina Maya, and if you like this video, please subscribe to AVTV and share this with your friends.